Welcome back to the Exploring Growth podcast. I'm glad you're here. Today, I speak with Laura Erdem, Senior Account Executive from Dreamdata.io, and we talk about revenue attribution and what it might look like to be a CMO for 100 days. All right. Thanks, Laura, for being on Exploring Growth podcast.
Lee, it's fantastic to be a part of your podcast. Thank you for the invitation.
Of course. Yeah. I'm so excited to get together with you and chat about some of the things that you have going on. I ran into you on LinkedIn, and you are doing a bunch of LinkedIn lives. I found a lot of value from them. Started listening in, and actually, I think one of the first points of engagement with you and your company was an article that you guys put out about sales and marketing alignment. And I don't know if you remember that. That was probably like a year and a half ago or something. And it was right before I started my podcast, actually, now I'm thinking about it. And I mentioned it on the podcast. And because I was talking with Dr. Riggs, who's a professor they actually have a sales program. And so we were talking about this kind of juxtaposition and what's happening with marketing and sales, and how is it growing and changing. And it was such a great article to use as a reference point in our conversation. So that's really kind of like my entry into Dreamdata, obviously the company you're working with. And then I was, see all your great content on LinkedIn. It's very, kind of like non-biased. I like that you're kind of guiding people through how to think about revenue attribution for B2B. So it's been great. I'm glad to finally have you here.
Lee, thank you so much. This is a huge compliment for our content writer because, well, he's writing the articles that we think are either possible buyers or influencers for our buyers might be interested in. We talk a little bit about ourselves. How are we running revenue? How are we running our teams? And since we are a B2B SaaS company ourselves, a lot of companies might be either doing the same or trying to pivot towards that. So this is a huge compliment that you find it relevant. We can definitely talk about the sales and marketing alignment at Dreamdata.
Yeah, that's awesome. You want to just say a word about Dreamdata and what you guys are about? I think that'd be good.
Thank you. So Dreamdata is a scale-up in Copenhagen, and we work with revenue attribution. So it's more or less mapping out all of your go-to-market data. That means all of your online touches, your traffic to your CRM, so you can understand that what marketing is doing, is it actually converting into sales? All of those fantastic campaigns, are they driving revenue? Or are sales not able to close all those deals that you're bringing in? So we're helping teams to understand what drives revenue so they can scale those pieces of their company.
Very important stuff. So let's talk about revenue. And revenue attribution is one of the major topics that you guys are about. That's what you're talking about a lot on LinkedIn. And so I have this question for you that I thought would be kind of fun to kind of kick off our conversation. And, a lot of my audience is obviously B2B, but they're mid-market, somewhere around the 10 million mark. And they're plus or minus, and they're building, they probably have a little bit of a pretty good sales team. And now they're trying to build a brand, and, they're thinking about all of these different things. And they go out there like all of us do, and they find information on Google and LinkedIn and various places, YouTube, about how to build a team. They're hiring, they're hoping to hire a player, marketing directors, VP marketing, to lead this effort of building the marketing part out. So, that's my audience, right? Those are the people who are tuning in. If you were a CMO, or VP marketing, whatever the title may be, for 100 days at one of these companies, these mid-sized B2B companies, what would you do to install best practices for revenue attribution? That's really, I think, would be really interesting, because it gives us a lot of room to run.
Yeah, and it's a very exciting question for a salesperson because I run sales at Dreamdata. And what if I was a CMO? How would I do the work?
Yeah.
So, okay, somebody hired me, a salesperson, as a CMO at a company that is sales driven, and they're trying to kick off their marketing and so on. So the first and the far most important thing is to set the CMO free for a long time.
Yeah.
So if sales are steering marketing's work, it's very likely not going to perform as you expect it to do because it's such a different discipline.
Yes.
Sales might be thinking what's helping their clients to buy, but they know their clients already there when they're in the consideration phase or
Mm-hmm.
when they're getting them on the cold calls. They're still not aware and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And education of your clients is a total different realm than what sales know about at all.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was a CMO, first of all, before I'm hired, I would have a serious talk with the CEO of where am I going to have my mark? What do you expect from me? Who am I going to collaborate with? And how much freedom do I have? And that might be a lot of nice words because everybody would say,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you're free to go and so on. Yeah, but what are you going to measure me upon
Right.
and when? Because marketing takes time. B2B marketing, so we've run some overviews of our clients. So an average B2B SaaS customer journey takes 192 days. 192 days to close a business from awareness, first touch in the customer journey,
Mm-hmm.
up till the business is closed. So if you have that time and you would say to a CMO, oh yeah, you kick off your things and so on, and then we will measure you in a month or two, well, that's not going to work. And then as soon as you know the length of the customer journey, the CMO also has to be chosen in the right direction because the CEO has to ask the CMO what will be the first things that you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the CMO starts talking about, oh, we're going to be building the brand and redoing the website and all that kind of beautiful things, the things that are seen on the mark of the CEO would see the actual website. Oh, yes, he or she did the work. They changed the
Mm-hmm.
website, but did it bring any revenue? And then the CMO could start like lowballing, say, yeah, but it takes time and so on. So there has to be a balance of the expectations and the deliveries. At Dreamdata, when we started our marketing and did not have that much of demand to start with, what our CMO started to do is creating articles and information to our prospect buyers about everything that sales have been asked on the calls.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we had a question on a sales call we could not answer or needed a longer explanation, that means that there are more people on the web looking for those answers. Then we would create a blog or a document about it, and we just continue doing that. If you have zero content or very high level content, get very basic into what questions your buyers are looking to get answered. As
Right.
soon as you've got that, go higher up level and start educating your market. And then you can talk about sales and marketing, alignment, whatever it is
Mm-hmm.
that you're selling, it's like higher
Mm-hmm.
level information so that when they come to you to learn that stuff, they will also learn about the questions that our buyers usually are asking. And then they're closer into the sales conversation because a lot of questions would be answered by your articles before they actually meet sales. And that will save sales time as well.
For sure. I would just say that like that underscores a lot of the things I've been saying for years. In to simplify it, I would say sales is not marketing and marketing is not sales. And a lot of times I have to install a new mindset for the manager or executives that are bringing me in because they're very a lot of times short term thinking. They're very results tomorrow driven because they've been doing sales for a number of years, and so now they want marketing to do what sales was doing, and that doesn't work. So I love that you start off with number one, what are we measured by? Because what that's going to do, I think, just because I'm thinking about conversations that I've had with actual CEOs, and I think what that's going to result in is them asking you, well, I don't know how to measure you, right? So then you have to give them. It kind of goes back to my point of they're looking for a player CMOs, right? Because they need someone to come in and show them the way. Now that's kind of a tricky thing because they want to hold them accountable to what sales was doing, but they don't know how. So I love that that is that is where you started, because that's such an important conversation to set the mindset correctly and establish a basis for how they're being measured. And then as they're moving along, everyone having their own territories. And of course, as you said later on, then they can become an alignment. But so I love that. That's a great start. So you're hired. You're hired.
For 100 days.
Yeah, for 100 days. And if actually, it's kind of funny that we're talking like this, because it's just a riff, but that's kind of how a lot of people think. They may not say you're hired for 100 days, but if you don't work out in 100 days, like if you don't produce new revenue in 100 days, they're going to start questioning you. So again, that's very much a sales mentality. And you said it's 192 days until someone buys. So, that's 90 days outside of the 100 days that you've been given to perform. So actually, that's a very interesting position that you've created here, because after 100 days, I think paying someone what they're paying, a high level executive marketer to come in and run a team and do all this, there's a lot of cost involved. They haven't really done this to a large extent before, unless they've been part of another company previously and seen it work. Caveat. So here we are at the end of 100 days, and you're going to start to kind of get a little itchy. Those board meetings are going to start to rumble, right? Precisely. And the marketer, even if they are a player, they're the star. Laura has decided to leave her sales career behind and start, become a professional CMO. That, or you don't know, you still have another 90 days to go, 92 days. So that's like another 100 days.
Yeah.
So in 100 days, you're worthless. Right. I mean, it could become like that. That could be the mindset, if it's set wrong, that, hey, in 100 days, what have you really done? Precisely. That to me, I feel that so much out there talking to CEOs. Yeah.
There are two things about this. So before I joined Dreamdata, I used to work for Gartner and selling to the CTOs and CIOs. And one of the biggest reports that Gartner is usually sold for the C-level suite is first 100 days. So one of the things for the salespeople, as soon as there is a new C-level in the company you're selling to, go out and talk to them about the first 100 days. What do you need to do in the first 100 days? Makes sense. For the CMOs, I mean, it has to be the right things that you're measured upon. What is it that you can have an impact on? Can you at all drive any revenue? What will you be measured upon on the way? So those 192 days, well, that's how long it takes for a client to find you and to buy the solution. But if you were to measure a CMO on the 192 days, well, those prospects first needs to come in and be aware of you. So that work starts even before 192 days. So it's even longer. Yes. So I sense that is the reason why the CMOs' careers are so short.
Yes. It's like for 100 days, all they're doing is updating their LinkedIn bio. Because at the end of 100 days, they're done.
Exactly. Next. Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah. So I hope the mindset will be changing a little bit, especially for B2B SaaS. I mean, if you are a B2C CMO, I think the impact is much faster because your buyers are buying so much faster. But for B2B, it's a different.
But the mentality has already been established there with B2C, because sales is sort of marketing. Sales is wrapped in with digital marketing. So you're already accustomed to spending money on ads. And so when you come from a sales, purely just cold calling, cold emailing, events, field marketing, whatever you're doing to generate leads, and now you're doing real marketing and doing things that are higher or harder to attribute. And you may not even have a high qualified CMO that's done this before. I mean, you're saying 192 days, then tack on maybe 90 days prior to prep for the 192. So we're getting close to a year here of really not a lot of traction. So that's interesting, because it really sets you up to have a powerful story from Dreamdata to explain like, okay, you're going to support the CMO in communicating to the C-suite how progress is being made, I assume.
Yeah,
So if in
exactly.
192 days, you haven't attributed any sales, well, you should be able to look at some data and say it's coming.
Yeah, exactly. To start looking at the early pipeline, the early views into what is being brought in. Are
Mhm.
those converting further into the pipeline? What is sales starting to do on that? What's working? Where are we dropping them off? That's where
Mhm.
attribution comes in, so you can understand the full customer journey.
For sure. So, I mean, what are some of the things that, or maybe just one thing that they should be thinking about prior to the 100 days? So, if they were looking to hire someone, what's the prep work look like?
Yeah. So really important to start tracking on the website.
Hmm.
Proper tracking. Usually it comes from either your web development team or even from the product team. If you are a B2B SaaS company, very
Hmm.
likely your product team is already tracking what's happening in the product. Do exactly the
Right.
same on your website. And if you understand where your traffic is coming from, when the new CMO is joining, that will be so much easier to grasp and
Hmm.
figure out, okay, most of the traffic is coming from here. Let's figure out how we can close this. Or we have no traffic from here. Let's see if we need the presence in here, and the testing will be much, much faster
Hmm.
instead of that you have to start collecting your traffic and understanding the historics. And then it will take much longer than 200 days for it, for sure.
Yeah. So it gives them some kind of general benchmark to run with. Um, and so I kind of go back to the content part of it. And I know prior to the call, you were saying like a lot of your LinkedIn lives and things that you're doing are still kind of experimental. And I like that because I love experiments because that's how we test and grow. Um, were your team when they're thinking about creating content, were they thinking about it primarily from an SEO standpoint, or did they have sort of a duality of mind from a sales support standpoint?
To start with, it was purely sales support.
Okay.
I mean, we are aware of SEO, but
Hmm.
the first thing is we need to help the troops up front
Hmm.
talking with our prospects to close those deals.
That's right.
And if we're able to have that in writing, it will be easier to have that explained on the calls.
Hmm.
First priority. Then, as soon as we had that part, then we started to see what type of a content is starting to bring in our clients. Is that what we're doing on LinkedIn? Is
Hmm.
that what's going on the website? Where are our prospects? Where do they come from? Where do we have to be with the high level content and with the specific content? It
Hmm.
really depends on where on the education journey our clients are, our prospects and the clients are. And then the SEO kicked in
Hmm.
to, yeah.
So a lot of that started on your website, I assume. Content, articles, and those type of pieces of content, and then it probably moved off to include also places like LinkedIn. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the mastermind of it all is our CMO. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
And he is the one making sure that we have the content that our prospects might be willing to read. And if the content that we wrote is not performing, we're figuring out what to write more of and less of. What
Hmm.
is it that at all not helping our clients to
Hmm.
convert into any types of further pipelines? And the content on LinkedIn comes after that.
Hmm.
This is something that is enabling our team to be proactive on LinkedIn and talk about the things that are relevant for our prospects. And we see that from either sales conversations because we record them, we talk about them on Slack and so on.
Right.
Plus, we see the insights in Dreamdata, what type of content is helping our prospects to move further in the pipeline. And the people who are on LinkedIn, they very likely only want to read the high level content. Sometimes we mix in the more technical attribution content and so on. And that one is actually helping out the prospects that are already in the pipeline or really considering the solution to read more and understand, okay, so this is how I can also use an attribution platform, kind of education one to many instead of I had to send videos to each and every prospect.
Sure. I love that. That's great. And so since we're kind of talking about content, talk a little bit about your LinkedIn. I think it's interesting, to get your perspective since you live in this marketing world as a salesperson, right? There's so much there's so much um, I don't know what's the right word to use, but like empowerment, I guess, as a um, growth professional to have a sales mind, but also in a marketing world, um, because that's where I feel like B2B is. You have to really understand sales to understand marketing, and vice versa. Like that, you really have to have an overlap. You can't just be, siloed. So I'm curious, how it plays out for you, or how it's playing out for you on LinkedIn specifically. Um, you know, um, Tell me about what you're doing and what's working.
Definitely. You alluded a little bit to that before. Like,
Mhm.
where is the market moving for B2Bs,
Mhm.
especially for how sales and marketing are collaborating? Because
That's
before
right.
in time, it was so purely siloed. When I used to work at Red Hat for what is it now, 6, 7 years ago,
Hmm.
marketing is a part of the company that is making sure that events are well executed, and they're just asking us for a list of leads that we
Hmm.
got at the events. This is the silo. That's where we shook our hands. That's it.
Hmm.
But where I see it moving right now is exactly what you're talking about. Sales has to do a little bit of marketing because your prospecting will be just as good as you're
Hmm.
able to grasp your audience, especially if you're selling to sales or marketing professionals. They're bombarded with messaging, with information all over the place. And for it to
That's right.
stand out in a way that people remember what you talk about, not
Hmm.
even knowing that you're actually selling to them, but educating them, then it will
Hmm.
be much easier for them to come over to you and at the end of the day be sold to, because nobody
Sure.
wants to be sold to.
No.
Marketing sounds very markety-ish, and oh, we help companies do this and that.
Yeah.
This is boring for a salesperson, and nobody
Yes.
will buy on that messaging. But if you're able to join the two and start talking about the problems in the market, the buyers will be attracted by that,
Hmm.
because it will be a voice that, okay, so if she's able to explain the solutions in those types of words, maybe if I'm in the sales conversation with this person, that might not be a waste of time. I might even learn something. Maybe not buy to start with. That will be my job to convert you to
Yeah.
buy,
Yeah.
but you will be much more eager to engage in a conversation.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I feel like education is that kind of critical piece where it's not that you're necessarily teaching people, but you're relating information. You're relaying and relating information to them, in the context that makes sense to them. So I really feel like LinkedIn Live is really the center of the universe for the most part. I mean, I don't want to make it too extreme, but I feel like LinkedIn Lives are highly underrated, highly undervalued, because it allows you to do what we're doing here in a with a feedback loop involved, you know. And I think that it's invaluable to get that feedback. I think there's a balance between um, uptaking the feedback that you're getting about need and problems, and giving that information, relating that information back to them, and balancing it with helping your audience to understand what they actually need, because they may not know. They're in the process of figuring out what solves their problem, or what their problem even is. But I think in those conversations, those live conversations, it gives you it's an even better mechanism than what we have here on the podcast, because here they're listening now and they may, make a comment or something retro. But I really love that for that reason. And as I've been a part of a couple of yours, and I like how they've been run. Just, they feel like, back to this word relatable, right? I feel like you're doing a good job of getting, of not only yourself, but you're getting your guest to take the knowledge that they have about the market, or whatever's happening in their domain, and relating it to the buyer, so that it might hit on a nerve that might be a problem somewhere. And it's not necessary. It has nothing to do really with sales much as it does, as much as about bringing together all the pieces of the puzzle for that user to kind of make up their mind about where they're headed. Of
Yeah,
course, it's all about timing for the user.
it is. And thank you very much for the compliment. It is still an experiment. That's what I'm saying. And that's
Yeah.
why it's so nice to hear the feedback like this means that we are on the right path.
Hmm.
And so the way at Dreamdata we started to run LinkedIn Lives was very experimental. One of the times we were sitting at our sales pipeline review and talking with the CMO, saying, why don't we do our Dreamdata demos live?
Hmm.
Like people, whoever wants to drop in, they just drop in and do that.
Hmm.
And what's the best platform? Well, we're already on LinkedIn. Let's try to do a LinkedIn Live.
Hmm.
And I said, fine. It was my idea. So let's do it.
Yeah.
And I'll do it. I'll run like every second week, I can run something like this.
Yeah.
And the first time, it was almost a complete flop because I had to figure out how streaming works and so on. I was talking
Yeah. Of
15
course.
minutes with myself and it was like that. Then our CTO comes in and says, Laura, you know that nobody can hear you. We don't see anything. So, oh shit, I'm halfway through. So, and then I figured out that you cannot do demos on LinkedIn Live because the screen is very small. The people who
Yeah.
are listening, they cannot see what you're showing. I
Hmm.
think we had like 10 people joining, so that mistake is fine. And it's
Hmm.
the best way to test this out.
Sure.
That one didn't work. Then we took the next one and the next one. And then instead of me presenting something, I started to invite people to it.
Hmm.
And people, to start with, it was on site. So I said, who do I know of marketers who would be good to be guests on our LinkedIn Live, who could share
Hmm.
something relevant for my audience on LinkedIn, for Dream Data's audience on LinkedIn. So we
Right.
spoke like, what is it? How do you prepare for your first CMO role? Or how do you do demand generation? Like really general topics.
Hmm.
Or how do you do proper UTM mapping? Things that people relate to, but we
Sure.
almost never spoke about Dream Data. It states
Right.
who's hosting the
Hmm.
session. All of the people who came in, well, they are already our clients. So
Hmm.
they felt a little bit obliged to mention Dreamdata once in a while. That helped,
Hmm.
but it
Yeah.
was not the purpose of it at all.
Sure.
And then later we thought, okay, so let's invite somebody else and let's try to do it online. Maybe that will work as well.
Yeah.
Just like we two are talking from the different parts of the world, we started to do that and we started to see that it's actually working. People
Yeah.
are willing to join. We're having like 100 people click attend and like 50 come to the live show. That's amazing numbers. And
Yes,
I
it
was
is.
doing it every second week. Then our CMO is coming over saying, Laura, could we do that every week? I said, no, 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 no. I'm in sales. So
Yeah.
now we stop this. That's where he joined me. So now we do it every week,
Uh-huh.
but he's doing some of the shows. I'm doing some other shows as well. And we just
Gotcha.
swap, and then he invites maybe a little bit higher based CMOs from like, I don't know, who was he talking like Profitwell and bigger companies because he
Right.
knows the topic and I can take on other guests that I'm just very curious about the topic and that also matches the audience interest. So we can just have a
Sure.
very good chat about it.
So are you finding most of your guests on LinkedIn now?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you're reaching out to them, or I assume probably some of them are reaching out to you. It's sort of like this, where I mean,
Most of the people don't reach out to us yet. So we're not that big. It's still an
okay.
experiment.
So
So,
no autograph signings or anything yet.
no, but I can tell you about the feeling of being known as well a
Oh,
little
I
later.
bet. Kind of
But
weird.
yeah, it is. But we invite so far, but it's also a very good thing because we can choose who we want on the show.
Yeah.
So we're inviting and we're inviting them personally. So it's not
Hmm.
like a third party, somebody inviting or they have to fill out something. We write to the people we want on the show. We tell them why we want them on the show and what is it that we're going to talk about. It
Yeah.
takes
Okay.
30 minutes for them. It's good exposure for them. It becomes a
Yeah.
podcast later as well. So
Hmm.
it's very targeted. And if somebody would come over to us and ask if they can be on our live show, we will still need to discuss if it's a good idea because it has to
Hmm.
match our audience. So the
Hmm.
best way to do it is to approach people you want to be on your show, really.
I like that. So, what has so far with this experiment? What has it done for Dreamdata? I mean, do you have any? Because I know you guys are about attributing success through the pipeline. What can you say about what your time spent on this has done so far?
So interesting you asked. And now I'm opening the blog that we've released
You're like, I
yesterday.
thought you would never ask.
No, but we've released a blog about this. And the next LinkedIn Live will be me and Stefan next week talking about what did we achieve with LinkedIn Lives.
That's awesome.
So
That's great.
the perfect timing. So
Yeah.
we ran last year, we ran 32 LinkedIn Live sessions. Out of those 32, we had over 18,000 attendees live.
Wow.
28 people we spoke with, external from Dreamdata, and lifetime minutes watched was 616 hours. It's a
Wow.
lot. For
That's
an
a lot.
experiment, it's crazy.
That is crazy. So are those watch hours from LinkedIn native, or is that after LinkedIn? Because you said you turned into a podcast, right?
Yeah, that's only native LinkedIn. We did
Wow.
not, podcast is really like baby steps so far, so we don't
Yeah, yeah.
calculate a lot from that.
That's amazing, though. I mean, I can't. I would never would have thought that. I mean, I guess consistency of 1 hour here, 1 hour there, um, it builds. The snowball effect.
It does. And when we look at how long people stay on the LinkedIn Live, I mean,
Mhm,
when I listen to a LinkedIn Live, I sometimes drop off if, I don't
mhm.
know, something happens, whatever, because it's secondary. You're just there and while doing
Yeah,
something else, right?
yeah, right,
And
right.
if people don't drop off and even ask questions while having the session, this is
Mhm.
so easy to measure if it is bringing value to your audience.
Yeah. Now, what about past LinkedIn? So, of all of those watch hours and viewers, do you have any kind of next steps from those?
We're starting this. So it's still an untapped market. So we
Hmm.
hired three new SDRs into Dreamdata because
Okay.
we have so much demand that we're not able to tap into it by ourselves only with the same hands. So the
Sure.
idea is to start conversations with all the people who have been on our LinkedIn Live,
Hmm.
especially when the topic is around marketing measurements and exactly
Hmm.
the topics that are like would help people to figure out that they maybe need an attribution solution. So we're
For
tapping
sure.
more and more into this to move it over to sales, closer to sales. And at the same time, we're repurposing some of the LinkedIn Lives. So they're being pushed into webinars, they're being pushed into YouTube. We do recreate them as content. Some of them are becoming articles as well. So that
Yeah.
marketing part is also being picked up.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Um, so kind of now that we've gone around the world here with content and attribution, let's go back, if you don't mind, to the 100 days, because now that you've been hired, I want to talk more about like kind of breaking down attribution a little bit, for let's say the CEO, as a CMO newly hired, what are you going to measure me by? And the CEO says, well, I don't know what to measure you by. And what, they don't say that directly, of course, because they don't want to look bad. But now you're going to tell them, okay, well, for this to go well and for your ears to not be itching in 100 days, here are some of the first things here's how I would lay the foundation for attribution. How would you lay that out for them? And it can be high level too. But again, remember, this is kind of like, getting things started and getting the bedrock formed.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, likely if the company was very sales driven, it would be difficult to run attribution and get a CMO measured according to attribution the first 100 days.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first thing, as we spoke about, tracking has to come in place. So the
Mm-hmm.
technology in the background, not even attribution technology, tracking, making sure that your UTM mappings are right, so you know
Mm-hmm.
where your traffic is coming from, starting to do some experimentation on your paid channels, starting to write some of the blogs and see how do they perform purely on traffic to start with and
Mm-hmm.
on form submissions. For that, you don't need attribution. Google Analytics is enough. Or if you want an alternative and understand how B2B companies perform on engagement, you can use Dreamdata for free for that. So
Mm-hmm.
kind of Start with traffic, see where they're coming from, get the foundation done. And
Hmm.
when you know and see some of the basics for that, you will start to build the data on top of it. Your
Okay.
CRM has to work. For you to have a proper attribution, CMO
Hmm.
even has to know how the pipeline is looking. How are we
Hmm.
measuring the salespeople? How are our prospects moving throughout the pipeline? Because if you start measuring a CMO according to attribution for, I don't know, sales qualified leads, well, we
Hmm.
need to talk about what is a sales qualified lead. When is the time that sales call it a sales qualified lead? When is it that they're dropping off? So those
Hmm.
measurements are going to be so different depending on the company's maturity as well.
For
And
sure.
to begin with, you don't need attribution. You need attribution when you got some basic data in place. There are so many
Okay.
prospects we're talking with where it's like, please go back and do some homework before
The
we actually
fundamentals.
engage. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then later, then you'll figure out, depending on your market, like paid works really well for a lot of companies. For
Hmm.
SaaS companies, review sites is something golden. So our CMO every single quarter is collecting reviews from G2, Capterra, because we know it works. We know
Hmm.
that's where our like buying ready prospects are coming through. And if
Hmm.
we're there, we're easy to find. So then you
Hmm.
can break it down to specific points. Are you going to measure me on how paid is performing? Are you going to measure me on how our review sites are performing? Are we getting clients?
Hmm.
Are we closing them through that? So there are so many moving parts depending on the business, but tracking has to be in place to start with. And then you can put the layers of various channels to test.
I like that. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And fundamentals is what I'm hearing. And then, it's really like, it's like, I think sometimes what we will do is we'll overcomplicate something that is actually very simple. This idea of, to make it more broadly is finding the platforms where your users are hanging out socially, but where are they hanging out for the technical part too? Because I know there's a lot of software companies, I've worked with a handful of them, that they have um, industry specific um, watering holes, right, where people are going to look at certain types of software or whatever. And so, to your point about these review sites, it's if they're going, if they're going to be there, then that's probably a place that you want to be. Now, if you're not in software and you're in manufacturing or something else, there's like an equivalent of that somewhere.
Yeah.
I was working with a training company recently, and they have an association that has a very that's the watering hole for everyone that's looking to continue their CEs and all of that. And they have a list serve that whenever anything's posted there, pretty much everybody sees it.
Exactly.
So they can literally have one person, a client, make a testimonial on the list serve, and they'll get new business.
Yeah.
So it's like, why overcomplicate something that at the bottom, the fundamental level, that can be a initial source of revenue that always works, uh, almost in perpetuity.
Exactly. Chris Walker speaks about that a lot. Talk to your clients.
Hmm.
I mean, the most important part is to talk to your clients and the prospects. Ask
That's
them,
right.
where have they heard about you from? They'll
Yeah.
tell you the one channel they remember they find you
Hmm.
about from. And then when you've got that significant amount of data, do attribution on top of it and figure out if
Hmm.
that person telling you they found you on LinkedIn, but they had 7 touches before, one on Google, one on Reddit, one on
Hmm.
Capterra. Well,
Hmm.
LinkedIn is very important because that's what they remember, but you still have to be on the other ones because
Hmm.
attribution tells you that that person actually was there as well. So it's
Hmm.
like talk to the people and then for sure have the data in place to be able to figure out how are they actually buying or what is it that they remember.
For sure. So, as we wrap this up, what else would you tell a CEO of a mid level company that's growing and they're wanting this to work, but they don't have really I don't know, they don't know what they don't know. They need that expert, marketer to come in and tell them. What else would you give them?
I think it's very important that they let the marketer go in a way because a lot of CEOs in the companies, especially if they're sales led, they
Hmm.
understand everything through the sales lens. And they will measure the CMO on the same values they measure the sales.
Right.
And if they don't have an impact immediately, well, it's a fast fire. And
Hmm.
so CEOs have to start understanding that it takes time to get marketing. And for the CMOs joining companies that are sales led, well, have a very honest conversation and figure out that you actually trust the CEO telling that they will let you
Yes.
go and let you do the stuff. It could be this is what they want to do,
Yeah.
but when the shit hits the fan and you're not
Hmm.
showing your deliverables that you have agreed upon, how are we going to deal with this? Or am I going to be
Yes.
fired or can I go ahead and do more experimentation?
I love it. I love it. And with that, you got the position. You have 100 days, and good luck to you.
Exactly.
You'll be fired in 95 days.
And then you can update your LinkedIn once again. I think
That's right.
that's why we're seeing that many fractional CMOs, because then it's
Yes.
kind of a safe way to go in and out.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. That's an interesting take. I like that, and I would agree with you on that. I think the whole market has sort of become fractionalized. Where you see the Fivers and Upworks and freelancers, and kind of working from your van in whichever country. Um, but yeah, that's great. I've loved talking with you. This has been a great conversation, and as I knew it would. And I'm looking forward to having you back if you'll come back in the future. And we'll keep following you on LinkedIn. I'll put all of your information below, website, contact on LinkedIn and everything, so people can find you.
Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure to finally meet you.
Definitely. Thanks for listening to the Exploring Growth podcast. If you are getting any kind of value out of this, please feel free to share this with a colleague, a peer, a friend, a neighbor, a stranger, anyone. We want to get this out to as many B2B, mid market, B2C growth leaders as possible, so they can get value as well. Also, if you don't mind, leave a review on Spotify, Apple, or all the other platforms, wherever you're listening to this. It would definitely help us with visibility.